So, good afternoon and welcome back to my channel. My name is Swamp Rose, and I'm continuing my podcast where I cover the Idaho 4 case, otherwise known as the case against Brian Koberger. And today I am going to keep this very short and sweet because I really just want to bring up the most talked about talking points on my channel right now. There's so many different things to cover in terms of updates, but I just feel like until we get an answer as to what's going to proceed on the trial or what's going to happen on the 18th, I want to bring up the topics that everyone's talking about right now. So I hope you don't mind that I'm not going over documents in this video. The first thing I really want to bring up is the changing of XANA's timeline. And I don't think that this is emphasized enough, is that one of the things that was emphasized to us in the PCA was that when Dylan turned around and thought that she heard XANA, she thought she heard Kaylee say there's someone here. It ended up being XANA. And the reason that they thought that is because obviously of a forensic download of XANA's TikTok activity. And then we found out XANA's last TikTok was at an hour earlier. It was literally 3:12 when we heard it was 4:12. So I think that that is something that I don't understand why it's not talked about more often, because it was so clearly said in the PCA and it changed. And if I could ask, the prosecution anything, that'd be one of the things I'd want to ask. The other thing that is really coming up a lot in my comment section are questions about the white Elantra. And I do think this is an interesting thing that my viewers are bringing up, which is why is there no still shots of the white Elantra? Like, we know that in the vague and undisclosed witnesses, we had Ann Taylor suggesting that Nick Balance has 7 minutes of exculpatory evidence. And this starts when the cameras change over at the Washington State campus. They change from tracking Brian Koberger's phone via his cell phone towers. Oh, Tonka's here. Hey, Tonka. A long time no see. I hope you're good. And then they switch over to cameras. Now, in all of those, he's pulling into parking lots. He's changing streets. Why is there no still shot of the Elantra in any of those? I think it's a really legitimate point that people are bringing up. And I was watching Rolamoto's channel about a week ago, and he brought up another thing too, and he's said this for a couple of years now. We really have to pay attention to the audio visual experts, and this is going to be probably a huge debate on the stand. So when we talk about the 7 minutes of exculpatory evidence, the other thing that keeps lingering in my head, and this kind of goes back to Brian Koberger's alibi, is the Celebrate data. So I wonder, we've talked about why would Judge Hippler be so upset about the leak, because there's been so many leaks in this case, but why is Judge Hippler particularly upset about Dateline leak? And a lot of people have suggested, well, it can't be the photos, it can't be some of these other things we heard. It has to be because some of the information exposed was from the warrants. I'm sorry if you guys hear they're doing yard work outside. They must have exposed something from the cell phone warrants. So going with cell phone warrants, I have so much curiosity about the Celebrate data. And the Celebrate data is essentially the GPS from the phone, the locational services, which should be more accurate than, or could pinpoint his location versus the cell phone tracking. Yet we hear nothing about the Celebrate data that would pinpoint BK's location. If you remember, when Brian Koberger was arrested, there was a statement released by Jason LaBar, which was his attorney back in Pennsylvania. And in this statement, Brian Koberger suggested, well, don't you have my GPS? Which would suggest he thought his GPS would free him or exonerate him. So I guess my question is, stop my camera for a second. If Brian Koberger thought that his GPS could possibly exonerate him, and it hasn't yet, it could mean it has to mean something. the data on that can't be manipulated. There's not a way to fake that or change it. Metadata like that can only be overwritten. So if it doesn't show his location, it could be that they couldn't get a read on it, but that's very doubtful with the forensics on the phone. It could suggest that it's been tampered with. And I wonder, is this part of the case? Is this one of the things that the judge has put in ex parte? One of these sensitive pieces of information they don't want us to hear, that somebody somewhere has tampered with the Celebrate data. Because why else would there be like such a battle over Ray and the cell phone tower experts and Nick Balance if they had this GPS data location? And so that's something that, and you can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, if there's an answer to that, I'd like to know, but I believe this indicates somebody has tampered with it. Now, whether that indicates the suspect or nefarious activity, or was there a mistake? I don't know, but I think of that when I think about the Celebrate data. Just a couple more things I wanted to go over. And since I have Tonka here, I want to, and we're talking about the timelines. It's interesting when you have XANA's timeline change with the TikTok. And I actually have had conversations with Tonka before regarding the changing timelines. I'm just going to read you something that I created. I'll just show it to you. I created a thumbnail. Tonka, where did I put it? So when we've discussed this in the past, I asked Tonka, I think my biggest question is why 350? Does that have something to do with BF's text? Because Tonka has stated that, or speculated on a different timeline that is earlier. And I know we've heard a lot of conversation about timeline being later recently. And this is what Tonka said. 351 is the time that DM entered the new contact. And you know that my original timeline was 157 to 336. And that has been modified 4 different times for different reasons. Knowing the forensic timeline changed the time, but is still 1 hour, 40 minutes. MPD wants us to believe that it only took 13 to 14 minutes, but it took much longer, in my opinion. Numbers don't lie. People do. I still stand by my original timeline, but according to the forensic downloads, it's between 210 and 351. I think that 210 was the call to EG was because someone called or text Dylan around 2 a.m. and told her to get out of the house, and returned at 351. And that's her alibi. She wasn't there for the show, and I have no idea how the state of Idaho plans to explain her alibi. I also have questions about that set MM initials with EG. That has absolutely nothing to do with the state's case, but it doesn't make any logical sense. So the 351 timeline is when DM entered her contact. Here's an interesting point that I'll end with after reading that timeline that I recently had a conversation with somebody in my comment section regarding. So like, if the state is going to go with an alternative suspect theory, let me turn the camera for a second. If the state is going to go with an alternative suspect theory, if the state is saying that, sorry, let me rephrase that because I'm not talking straight. If Brian Koberger's defense team is going with alternative suspect theory saying that Brian Koberger is innocent by nature, they're going with an alternative suspect theory. And they're presenting evidence for alternative suspect in a sealed hearing on the 18th. The question that I would have is, no, I can't talk straight today. The question that I have would be, when Dylan opened her door and she saw the perpetrator walking by, clad in black, bushy eyebrow, holding a vacuum, dressed kind of like a fireman. Giving vague examples. If Brian Koberger is innocent, according to Ann Taylor and Massoff, then does that mean that Dylan saw the alternative suspect walk by her door? That's the question I have. I mean, is this what Ann Taylor is posing? This alternative suspect is going to have to match that description. So, I mean, even though we don't know what they're presenting now, I don't know what we're going to see in court, what they're going to be allowed to present or hear. It kind of does put into perspective what they could possibly be saying. Are they going to say there were two people in the home? Not likely. If Brian is innocent, then that means it was the unaliver who walked by. So it wasn't Brian. So it'll just be interesting. It'll be interesting who they name, and it will have to be someone that matches that description that DM had, which when you add up the statistics, I mean, it isn't necessarily representative of a large part of the population. So anyway, that's really all I had to say today. I didn't really want to do, I've only been on for 10 minutes. I didn't want to do a long live stream, but I just wanted to stop in and just say hi. Let my members know I appreciate your members. Just kind of have been staying off of YouTube, but I will be back soon. I don't know who's watching right now because it can't tell me how many people are watching. I don't know if it's just you, Tonka, but I think I'm going to make this private afterwards. And yeah, I wanted to bring up these themes and just see if anything resonated with someone. I might do a live stream later tonight, but hit that notification bell. So I miss you too. I miss all of you guys. But anyway, I'll talk to you soon and have a great day.